Hello, Assalamu alaikum. All right. Today's objective is to solve one of the questions from the SBR paper on the practice platform, right? I have received a lot of requests from students to solve the first question, is question number one, mainly on consolidation on the practice platform, right? So that is what we'll be doing today. This is your ACCA global website, right? All you have to do is go to students, go to this option, study support resources, right? Come over here, choose ACCA qualification, choose the paper you want to practice for. So it could be any of these papers. We're studying for SBR, right? Come down over here, CBE, question practice, ACCA practice platform. You choose your variant, which is international, and we will be doing March June 2019. All right. So you click on this, and it will ask you for your ACCA ID, which it hasn't because I've logged in, right? So it will ask for your ACCA ID and password sometimes, right? If you've already logged in, then it won't. So this is what it looks like. The start, a new exam structure and format has been introduced for strategic professional exams. And just read the instructions before you start the exam. This exam won't be timed, reason being because it's practice, right? So there are 4 pages of instructions. You have instructions 1 out of 4. It tells you exactly how to highlight a particular statement that you want to do, that you want to highlight. For example, it allows you to strike through, copy paste. You have the options Control C, Control V. Obviously, all other shortcuts on Excel or on Word, you won't be able to apply them, right? And then you have navigation, how to navigate, right? Flag for review, how to flag a question, for example, if you want to review it at the end of the paper. You have inbuilt calculator within the practice platform and within obviously the live CBE platform as well, right? So both scientific and normal calculators are embedded. And then you have your Scratchpad, right? So Control C, Control X, Control V. These are shortcuts that you can use on a Scratchpad, right? Retains all notes, workings entered, and these are available for the duration of the exam only. They will not be submitted for marking after your live exam. That means this is just for rough workings, right? But it will obviously save those rough workings. The notes or workings entered onto the Scratchpad or your workings paper during the live exam will not be marked. Remember this, guys. This won't be marked, okay? If you want the marker to see any notes or workings for tasks in the live exam, you must show them within the relevant response options. All right, so you have symbols as well. You can use both, like you can, I guess you have options to use yen, pound, dollar, and some other currencies as well. You have the navigation screen. Okay, you get an option over here on the right side. Review the exam, right? So you have a review screen where it tells you whether you have opened up a question, whether you have, let's say, let me just, my screen is just, stuck. All right, so you can review your screen, right? And in the end, right, you have an option to end the exam. Okay. Now, PDF exhibits toolbar. Remember, there's a difference between the CBE practice platform and the live exam, right? So within the practice platform, you have a PDF exhibit which will show these options, and within a live exam, you'll have these options, right? This is basically a header of the screen, right? So of the software. So selecting text in a PDF exhibit, how can you select the text, right? Display of selected text in a PDF exhibit, find tool in the PDF exhibit, right? So find tool will help you find specific, word or item that you need to find. Exam summary, obviously this is SBR, section A, section B, right? So you have 2 questions in section A, 2 questions in section B. All questions are compulsory, right? And once you have read all the instructions, it will ask you to start the exam. So let's say yes. Now this is section A we're looking at. You have your navigator over here, right? So your navigator tells you you haven't seen question 1 so far because I haven't opened it. Question 2, obviously unseen, and 3, and so on, so forth. You can flag your, you can see the status of the flagged questions over here, right? For further review. All right, so here we have a first question. Question number 1 from March, June 2019, SBR International. It says, Carby's company is the parent company of an international group which has a presentation and functional currency of the dollar. Now, I've always told my students that looking at the first line, let's say not the first line, let's say the first paragraph, you can easily assess what the question would be about, right? So this is, so far, what I can analyze is that this question is probably about a foreign subsidiary, right? The group operates within the manufacturing sector. All right. On 1st January 20x2, Carby's acquired 80% of the equity share capital. Now, this is something that is important, right? So let's just highlight this because we might need to come back to it later on, or this information might be useful somewhere else, right? An overseas subsidiary. Okay. The acquisition was not as successful as anticipated, and on 30th September 2026, Carby's disposed of all of its holding. So on 30th and 2026, Carby's company disposed of, right? So this is important. And your current year is 31st December, right? So these are important points that you need to highlight. The following exhibits available on the left-hand side of the screen provide information relevant to the question. Bike Light Company trading information. You have provides information about Bike Light Company's presentation, functional currency. All right. Acquisition of Bike Light Company explains how Bike Light Company was acquired on 1st January 2022, and then disposal. All right. So we have a question on disposal of a foreign subsidiary. Describes the disposal of Bike Light Company on 30th September 2026. This information should be used to answer the question requirements within your chosen response or response options, basically. Now, I know that I've always asked my students to look at the requirements first and answer the question according to the requirements. Don't read the entire question. All right. The reason why I just read the entire paragraph is because it's introductory paragraph, right? There is no extra information. In fact, there's information that is very much relevant, that would be very much relevant to my very first requirement probably, right? Because I must know exactly how much I have within the equity, that is how much Carby's has within the equity, right? So it holds 80% of the equity share capital of Bike Light Company. When did it acquire Bike Light Company? So that was 1st January 2022. So let's just read the requirements. You have all the tabs over here: Bike Light Company, trading information, acquisition of Bike Light Company, disposal of Bike Light Company, right? I'll just open each tab so that you know exactly what it looks like. So this is information on Bike Light, right? This is the acquisition information, all right? And this is the disposal information, okay? So you have an option to rotate, text selection, hand tool, all the options, right? Now, let's read the requirements first. All right, before I read the requirements, this is your word processor, okay? So you type over here, okay? And this is your spreadsheet. It takes a little bit of time to open up. All right, so here's your spreadsheet, right? Obviously, not everything can be done with the mouse and the sorry, not everything can be done with the keyboard. You have to use the mouse as well, right? I cannot press F2 to, you know, open up the cell. I have to use double click, right? So you can either type, right? So let's say you start typing. If you want to edit something, you double click the cell and you edited. All right. Requirements. All right. So the first requirement is prepare an explanatory note for the directors of Kirby's company which addresses the following issues. What is meant by an entity's presentational and functional currency? All right. Explain your answer. Now this is something that I've already done in the class in one of the questions, right? We've talked about foreign subsidies. This was during the lecture as well and during the practice as well. Okay. So explain your answer with reference to how the presentation and functional currency of bike light company should be determined. So you have to specify or you have to link it to the case as well. All right. A calculation of the goodwill already, that's another part. So let's just do the first part. So you have to talk about presentation and functional currency, right? Explain your answer with reference to how the presentation functional currency of bike light company should be determined. Now, a lot of students, what they'll do is they'll first generally talk about IS 21, right? Presentation functional currency, and then they'll apply to the case, right? That approach is fine, right? But I see a clear bifurcation in the question. Presentation, so general, let's say general element on the presentation side, and then I apply it to the case, and general, uh, points about the functional side, and I apply it to the case. So that that way, it's easier for you to sum up the entire scenario and then move on to the next scenario. All right. So you don't have to switch between scenarios. All right, so let's read the bike light company trading information. Now the best part about it is that everything is bifurcated for you already, right? The acquisition of bike light company enabled Kirby's company to access new international markets. So the enabler was bike light. That means now this is one point that is important, right? That means bike light company is not dependent on Kirby's company, probably, right? We'll obviously read further information. Kirby's company transfers surplus work in progress to Bike Light company, which is then completed and sold in various locations. Bike Light company is based overseas where the domestic currency is the dinar. All right. So, yep. All right. So staff costs and overhead expenses are all paid in dinars. However, Bike Light Company also has a range of transactions in a number of other currencies. Approximately 40% of its raw material purchases are in dinars and 50% are in yen. Okay, so 40% raw materials in dinars and 50% is in yen. The remaining 10% are in dollars, of which approximately half are purchases of material from Kirby's company. So approximately 5% settlement was there because you're purchasing something from your parent. This ratio continued even after Kirby's company disposed of its shares in Bike Light company. All right, revenues invoiced in equal proportion between dinars, yen, and dollars. Okay, to protect itself from exchange rate risk, Bike Light company retains cash in all three currencies. No dividends have been paid by Bike Light company for several years. At the start of that means there's if no dividends have been paid out, remember the company was acquired on 1st Jan 20x2, being disposed of on 30th September 20x6. So that's approximately 4 years and 9 months. Okay. Okay. So within these 4 years and 9 months, probably there have been no dividend payouts. That means there is no cash dependency of the parent on the subsidiary, right? There's probably the only transaction that is being done on, that means cash dependency means cash withdrawals, right? The only transaction that is probably being done is Kirby's company is transferring surplus work in progress to Bike Light company, and Bike Light company further, completes the WIP and sells the finished good. Okay. Revenue is invoiced in equal proportion between dinars, yen, and already we read that already. At the start of 20x6, Bike Light company sought additional debt finance. As Carvey's company was already looking to divest, funds were raised in an issue bonds in dinars. There are a lot of points to highlight in this, but I'm not doing it because, let's say, I'll come back to it later when I want to answer it, right? None of which were acquired by Carvey's company. So Carvey's company, because obviously it was divesting, it does not want to provide any kind of funds or finance to Bike Light company. Therefore, it did not take up the bond. Now, I believe this is sufficient information for us to answer the first part. Okay, so let's start the first part. All right. So what is meant by entity's presentation currency? Let's say I start with presentation currency, right? And let's say I mention the requirement. So it's A1. Right? So that's what generally IS 21 tells you, right? Presentation currency is the currency in which the financial statements are presented of a company, right? Now there is no, as per IS 21, there is no defined or criteria according to which you can determine your presentation currency, right? Presentation currency can be anything, in any currency that you choose to present your financial statements in. But again, it's a standard, IS 21, right? It's a standard. It is derived, or the basis of your accounting or your accounting standards is your conceptual framework, right? And your accounting principles, right? So faithful representation, we will not forget faithful representation. We will not forget relevance. We will not forget reliability. We will not forget understandability. We will not forget, let's say, you know, timeliness and all of these factors. But the point is, in this part, right, the only thing that is, I believe, that is relevant is, you know, talking about relevance and understandability, right? These are the 2 points. As per IS 21, presentation currency is the currency in which the finances are presented of a company. This can be determined, I would say, relevance and understandability of the financial statements, right? Now, what is meant by an entity's presentation currency that I explained? Explain your answer with reference to how the presentation currency, I'm not reading the functional part, with reference to how the presentation currency of Bike Light company should be determined. Pretty simple, no? This can be determined by the directors. Let me just remove this. This can be determined by the directors of the company, giving consideration that enhances the relevance and understandability of the financial uses of financial statements, right? You can say, since the name is Bike Light, right? Incorporated overseas, its FS in dinars, right? So that's, I believe, presentation currency, functional currency. Now, functional currency is something that requires a bit of debate in this scenario, because let's just look at the scenario again, right? So the acquisition of Bike company enabled Carby's company to access new international markets. That means Bike is the enabler, all right? Bike does not depend on its parent for business. It does not depend on its parent for finance. It does not depend on its parent for its operational autonomy, right? That means basically Bike has its own operational autonomy, right? Carby's company transfers surplus work in progress to Bike company is already we already read all of this, but the point is Bike company is based overseas where the domestic currency is the dinar. Staff costs and overhead expenses. Now remember, for a functional currency, right, it's very important for you to know the difference, or for you to know both the primary and the secondary criterias, right? Primary, there are three primary criterias, right? Number one, sale. So the currency in which your sales figure is being determined, right? The currency of the country of which the regulations and the competitive forces determine or affect the sales price, right? And the third one is your your currency basically in which you incur your direct costs, which is labor, material, overheads, right? So direct costs. So these are the primary conditions. When you look at the secondary conditions, you have to look at the finance availability. In what currency you're raising finance, in what currency are you retaining, or you're collecting and retaining basically the cash from operating activities, right? uh, how much dependent are you on your parent, right? So because obviously you have to look at the parent element as well, right? Because it's related to this question. Reason being, if you don't because obviously if you're dependent on the parent for, let's say, finance, for, let's say, you don't have any operational autonomy, for example, your funds, your finance, your cash is readily available for repatriation by the parent, right? That means you actually are an extension of the parent, right? You're not actually, you just have a legal existence, a separate legal existence, but not a separate economic existence. So the point is that you just become an extension of the parent, and parent's functional currency becomes your functional currency, right? So we have to assess all these factors. So let's just look at it. Now that's my interpretation of what IS 21 says, all right? That's my interpretation of what IS 21 says. It is not wrong. Please, all right? You will get marks on it. Now remember, you have to talk about, like I discussed, you have to talk about a lot of factors over here, right? So make sure that you have, or you're managing your time as well, right? Because over here, obviously, it's a question that is for 7 marks and requires significant explanation, right? And the time element is of essence, right? Time is very crucial in this case. You keep on writing, keep on typing, and you forget about the time. That is where you will definitely fail, I would say, right? Or you would probably pass on a 52 or 53 of boarding marks. The point is that is not what we expect, right? And that is not what we're working for over here. Okay, so according to IS 21, functional currency is a currency in which economic transaction of a company takes place. So what I would like to do is basically, once I've explained what exactly functional currency is, as per my understanding, right? I would dive into the application of this scenario, right? Why? Because I have a lot of points to write about, right? So I would straight away dive into whether, or just to determine, right, what Byteline's functional currency would be. Okay. So according to IS-21, functional currency is considered. Okay. So considering the functional currency of, considering the foreign primary currency against the functional currency of Bytelight, right? So you can say, now there could be, like I said, there could be various ways of writing an answer. All right, this is just what I would probably do in an exam, right? My way of writing an answer includes paragraphs, it includes points, it includes statements, one-liners, right? It includes everything. Reason being, I'm more comfortable when I'm given a free hand, right? When it's easier for me to express myself rather than restrict myself on the expression side, right? So currency, which determines the sales price of for the or of the entity, right? Currency of the country which, or no, whose regulations and competitive forces determine or affect. So you can use any of the words, right? And currency in which the entity pays or incurs direct cost, which could be, example, yeah, labor, material is another example, and overheads. Okay. Now, I have written down the general aspect of IAS 21, just in, let's say, this would be around 2.5 to 2 lines, I would say, right? It actually seems to be 3 lines because I haven't completed the lines, but the point is, if you look at the number of words, it's actually 2 lines, right? The point is that this is enough, right? Now what I need to do is I need to find whether I have whether I have this information, right? The points that I've written down over here, whether I have information against it in the case. So let's see. Yes, you have information about the third point, right? But you don't have any information about approximately 40%. All right. So staff costs and overhead expenses are all paid in dinars. Okay. Range of transaction number of other currencies. Okay. Approximately 40% of raw material purchases are in dinars. All right. The remaining 10% are in dollars. Okay. The ratio can, okay. Revenues invoiced in equal proportion between dinars, yen, and dollars. But remember, dinar is dinar is the currency in which you settle your staff costs. Dinar is the currency in which you settle your overhead expenses, and dinar is the currency in which you settle your cost for or you incur your cost for the raw materials. That's 40%, right? This ratio continued even after Carby's company disposed of its shares in Bytelight company. Revenue is invoiced, all right, so we know that it's equally between dinars, yen, and dollars. So we don't, from this point, let's say, from the revenue point, right, we don't get enough information, Like the point is that we cannot determine whether it's dinar, dollar, or yen, right? But from the cost point of view, yes, we can determine it's dinar, right? Determine means there's an indication. It does not mean that, it's not my final stance, but it's, an indication that it could be dinar. We have to consider other factors as well. To protect itself from exchange rate risk, Bike Development retains cash in all three currencies. So that's a point for the secondary one. No dividends, that's all right. So we can talk about it now. Realized in all three currencies. Again, use the case. Use the case to build up your answer. That is where you will, your answer will basically stand out. Okay. Use the case because obviously you're given the information. Why do you want to take assumptions? Why do you want to produce or, hypothetically assume something, right? You have everything in the case. And if there's something that is not part of the case, you will not mention it until unless the examiner has asked you to mention it. Point is, I have seen, and you guys have also seen questions where the examiner asks, such as, what further things could have been, or what could have affected the assumptions, what further information could have affected the assumptions, right? That is where you write what additional information was required to, to produce a better solution, right? But in this case, there's no such requirement. As in the case of bilateral revenue is realized in all three currencies in an equal proportion. Now, I don't need to mention the currencies. Please don't be over smart. All right, don't try to be over smart. Three currencies, it's already mentioned in the case, that's yen, dollar, and dinars. All right, don't try to, put in words which are not, or which will not get you marks. Okay. As in the case of bilateral revenue is realized in all three currencies in an equal proportion, therefore all right. uh, is purchased in dinars. All right. There's one more point that you can talk about. Currency of the country whose regulations and competitive forces determine or affect the sales price. Remember, if the sale is being realized in three currencies equally, right, in equal proportion, that means probably the regulations and the competitive forces equally impact my top line, my revenue, right? So if you don't even, if let's say you don't talk about it, let's say you don't discuss this point, it's okay, because it's all the same that I've, the first point that I've discussed in this case, which is this one, is the same, right? It will basically, it does not mean that it's same means it will get you the same outcome. That is what I mean. Okay. So again, remember your answer should be, and again, this, why am I not repeating it? Because this does not lead me to any conclusion. All right. That's why I'm not repeating it. Same does not mean, so let's say if I have 2 points or 3 points, right? If I have 2 to 3 points where, let's say functional currency is dinar, right? I will not stop at discussing just the first point, and I'll say that other points will also give me the same conclusion. So I won't discuss them. Let's move on. All right. That won't be the case. The case over here is that it does not lead me to any conclusion. All right. That's why I don't want to discuss it again, because it's waste of words and it's waste of time. Okay. As for the cost structure, 40% of raw materials purchased in dinar, Okay. And all of the staff overhead and staff costs and overheads are spelling mistakes. Make sure that they're to a minimum. But if you still, for example, I didn't correct this because I don't want to, right? This I didn't correct it because I don't want to, right? The examiner understands what I've written. Okay. As for the cost structure, 40% of the 40%. You remember, you have to be, you have to keep yourself flexible, please. All right. Don't get into things that won't, help you get good marks, quality marks. Obviously, quality marks means you write down a point and it's good, and just a small point gets you 1 mark rather than explaining the entire case and getting 1 mark for it. All right. As for the cost structure, 40% raw materials purchased and none all of the staff costs and overheads are incurred in right. Secondary points or secondary, or you can call it, I would, yes, I would replace this by factors need to be. Now, when I talk about secondary factors, I won't be putting it in pointer form. All right. I'll just write down, I'll just discuss one point and I'll, give my conclusion on it, whether it reflects the NAR is the functional currency or not. And then I'll move on to second point. All right. I won't bifurcate it, right? Because obviously there are a lot of points that we need to talk about. Okay. So furthermore, secondary factors need to be considered. And I would say that in the case of bike light, the reason why I am discussing all the points first that are related to the subsidiary, sorry, to the parent, to the link with the parent, is because if I am able to conclude, if I conclude that, let's say, bike light is dependent on uh, carbies, right? That means I don't need to discuss further, right? Carby's functional currency, which is dollar, will become the functional currency of uh, bike light. All right. So furthermore, secondary factors need to be considered in case of bike light. It has operational autonomy, or you can say, so what it says, or you can, all right, I'll just rephrase my sentence. As well as purchase WIP. Right. So the point is, now why have I written this point? Access to international market is one thing, right? Or you can say purchase WIP and finished. This shows operational autonomy. This shows autonomy of not just the operations, but the distribution, the selling as well. All right. Or not paid out dividends in the previous years. Moreover, bike light is not paid out during the previous years, which reflects that even after 8% volume of RB's bike light. Not the funds, obviously the profit. Or you can say subsidiary or bike light, it's your choice. I've been using bike light again and again, that's why I'm using the word subsidiary. Profit of the subsidiary. Repatriation. Right now, this suggests, now coming back to the main point of IS 21, bike light, it is not just an extension of Carbise, therefore functional currency. You can write it down in bracket, dollars, functional currency of, right? Now, let's discuss some other factors. So remain 10% dollars, which approximately half of purchases of material, that's we've discussed. All right, protects self, exchange it, retains cash in all three currencies. All right. Retains cash in all three currencies, which reflects, or I would say, generated from the operations. Which does not make it clear, which does not suggest, you can say. Or which does not give a clear stance. So there are various words or statements that you can use, which does not suggest as to what may be the Now, I'm using bike light again, right? In the very beginning, if I let's say over here where I first use this bike light, all right. So I can, or is it before? Right, I used over here, right? I could have used B company, right? And after that, I could have easily replaced bike light, let's say over here, with B company, right? So this is one way of doing it. Other factor determined as per IS-21 is a finance raised by bike light. Is there any other information that we need to consider? Revenues several years at the start of budget sort additional debt finance is kind of was already looking divestment. All right. Does it say why the funds were raised? At the start of the budget sought additional debt finance. No, it does not say. It does not say that. Otherwise, I would have used that reason to reason out, why bike light raised funds in dinars. Bike light issued bonds down in dinars, which is the it may, or you can say that, bike issued bonds down in dinars, which suggests the functional currency in dinars as the finance is readily available in the said currency. Conclusion. Determined or concluded. All right. So that is your answer for this question, right?